Plants from the nursery are expensive, and if you've loads of gardens to fill, then the cost really adds up. In today's video, I'll show you how I'm creating my own herbs, flowering and fruit shrubs, and even some veggies from plants I already have. Hi, I'm Linda, and I grow my own food here in Southeast Australia. Herbs are really expensive if you buy them in the supermarket or even as little plants from the nursery. So why not make your own? If you can grab a cutting from a friend, or if you want to duplicate your own plants, you can just chop that off and put it in water, and soon you'll have new plants. Back in May, I did just that with rosemary cuttings, and all I did was cut them, put them into a jar of water, and right now I've got 3 out of 4 cuttings that have struck, which is what you call it when you get the roots growing. So these little cuttings are ready to pot up. Now, I did have a fail. This one here, you can tell it failed. It sort of started to dry off and die off, so we can throw that one out. But these all pot up beautifully, just like these two have, which I did kind of earlier in the year. Now, in spring, I'll be able to pop these out into the garden or give them to friends. And I know that they're ready because I've got little roots coming down the bottom. Rosemary is not the only herb you can do that with. Right here, I've got some Vietnamese mint that I got a cutting from a friend. I put them into water, struck them, got the roots growing, and now look at all the roots coming from that one. That's ready to plant into the garden. But you can also propagate herbs a different way. I've got thyme here and also some mint that's really easy just to dig up and separate out the plant. They kind of root all the way along their stems, and so it's really easy to divide the plant. Just here, I've got the parent plant to that little thyme plant that you saw in the pot, and you can see it's starting to spread out. Now, if I just dig up a small section, and I'll pull that off, and you can see there's loads of little roots right along the stems. So you can see here, that's fine roots, that if I pop those up, that will grow into a new little plant that I can spread around or share with friends. It's still winter here at the moment, so my mint is kind of a bit dormant, but you can see this little peppermint plant that I planted only 6 months ago has, during winter, just spread its little roots all out, and when spring comes, it's just going to burst to life. But right now, or any time really, you could just dig some of this up, which I'll do here. Take that little plant, I'll just get the soil off. Normally I just leave the soil on. And like the thyme, that's got loads of little roots that I'm going to pot up, and I can spread that around as well. Now, if you do plant mint in your garden, remember that it will spread and take over various areas. So either keep it in a pot or put it in an area of the garden where that doesn't matter. Another example of a herb that spreads its roots around is oregano. Now, on the edge of my garden here, where it looks a little bit weedy, the oregano spreads out like a weed, and I'll often be pulling that out by the handful with all the roots at the bottom. In this section of my pavers, where I should really be doing some weeding, I've got a little oregano plant here that needs to come out like all the weeds. And if I can gently ease it out, you can see there, it's got loads of roots on it. So that'll pot up beautifully. Now, another thing you could do, if you can't source the plant you want and you have to buy it, perhaps go in with some friends. What you then do is you get your plant and you split it. So this plant here is my Vietnamese mint, and I should be able to just divide this plant into a number of plants. So this side has, I could probably divide that into 2. And as long as they've all got their root system, I'll pop that up, get that growing so the roots are all coming out of the pot again. And I've got another one here. And I could probably divide this one as well. And you can see that there, that's another little shoot coming through to create a whole new plant. So I could just sort of cut that one off, pot it up, and that'd be a plant. So let's do that. So that's another plant there. And we should be able to cut that bit off right there. So this one plant has now turned into 5. Now I've also been experimenting with propagating flowering shrubs. This is a Hebe plant that I took these cuttings from back in May. And as you can see, it's got heaps of roots coming along on that. So they'll be successful. I'll have to be potting those up soon. And this other one here is Westringia. Now the one with the beautiful flower on top, which I should cut off because that'll drain the energy from the little plant, has finally, after a few months, got a couple of shoots on it. So I'm going to give those little cuttings a bit longer in the water. The cuttings themselves look alive still, so I'm sure the others will be getting roots on them fairly soon. 2 other cuttings that I took back in May were Grevillea and a Callistemon, which I want to grow out because I want to fill in space up along my top fence line. Over the last week or so, I've been busy clearing blackberries out of this space. I don't use poison on the blackberries, I just chop them back. So it's going to take a few years of keeping on chopping these blackberries back before I feel confident about planting here. So in those few years, I hope to grow my own replacement plants. So I'm going to take a few more cuttings and just keep trying. Now with the cuttings, apparently, it depends on the time of year what type of cuttings you take. At the moment, it's late winter and we're heading into spring. Now in spring, you can get soft tip cuttings which grow the fastest. In winter, they're more a hardwood cutting, so they will take the longest to strike. And if you got them in autumn, then they're kind of a semi-hardwood. But let's see what we've got here. Now it's still winter, so they're probably still hardwood cuttings that we're taking. But I'm doing it now while I remember. And if I pot these up or stick them in water, it will remind me to kind of get them done in spring. And this little one's about to burst into flower. I don't know what it is, which is why taking cuttings is perfect, because you don't need to know what they are, but you just take your cutting and give it a go. That ought to do it. Cuttings collected, let's get them processed. Now, practice makes perfect with striking cuttings, as with anything. Now, what I've recently learnt with Grevillea is if you can take a heel cutting, it increases the amount of cambium layer of the plant, which increases the amount of rooting hormone that you've got. So to get a heel cutting, I'm just going to take this part of the plant here and I'll try and break it off. Well, I've pulled quite a bit off, so all of that will expose sort of more cambium layer to the soil. And I'm just going to dip that into honey as well. I might trim it a little bit. So I'll just trim that bit off and I'll dip that into honey. Now it's winter here and my honey's kind of crystallised, but I don't think that'll matter. I'll just wipe that through. And the honey is kind of to sterilise the area, and we'll see how that goes. Just going to trim all of those off. And I'm just going to trim it to about here. And then that's my little cutting ready to go. I'm going to pop it into this tub of soil. Previously I've used water, but it failed. So I'm just going to make a hole here, put it into the soil, and we'll keep that moist and hopefully that'll strike whereas my water method didn't. So I'm just going to do that with all the cuttings I've got here. Just put them all in the one pot, and once it's complete I might just cover it over with a plastic bag to kind of keep it moist, although every few days I might let the fresh air through, and we'll see in sort of 6 to 8 weeks how we've gone. Now this is my first callistemon cutting, and these are the little points where the leaves came off, so I've taken the leaves off, and you need to bury at least sort of 2 of those, although I might just bury it up to here, and that's where the roots are likely to come from. And I've just put the honey on the exposed cambium sort of area. Now I'm just leaving it here with this plastic bag on top, which is kind of acting like the little greenhouse. I mean, it's a bit flimsy, but we'll see how it goes. In 6 to 8 weeks, we might have some roots. So that's some flowering shrubs cuttings taken care of. What about our fruiting shrubs? Well, currants are very easy to root, and right here is where I placed some trimmings of red currant plants a few months ago, and they're just starting to root now. Now you can see the little white roots just starting on these cuttings. At this point you could plant that out, but I'd probably trim that down just to give the plant a better chance at getting going, and be careful when planting so that you're not damaging those roots. But look at this here, we're just nearly heading into spring and these plants are already starting to shoot. So that would be a great candidate to get planted, even though there's no roots at this point. There is life happening, so I'm sure the roots would form if we just sort of trim off those, plant that in the ground, and that should just get going. So that was our red currants propagated. Now this tub is full of black currant trimmings. I trimmed my oldest black currant plant and shoved it in here. And you can sort of see there's lots of life coming already with the leaves starting to happen. But also at the root level, we've got lots of little roots starting to come as well. So for this, I would trim this back to here and probably here and take that off and just kind of plant that stick, and that will start shooting again from those points. But I'm going to have loads of plants from this bathtub full. Blueberries is a fruiting shrub that I would love to be able to regularly propagate, because I'd love to spread them around my swales. Now I have successfully grown 1 plant from cuttings, and I hope to do some more. Now I might be making a separate video on my trials and tribulations of propagating blueberry plants. I believe there's a number of ways to do it, but there's always lots to learn and lots to have fun with too. So I'm not going to show you what to do with the blueberries today. I might make a separate video, and we'll see how I go in that one. With raspberries, I don't have the same issues as blueberries. They propagate so easily. The vines just run along the ground and up pops new little plants, and you can just dig those up, spread them around, give them to friends. Now this whole patch here was from raspberries I got from a friend of mine, and it's done pretty well. It does get a bit of shade here, so not as good as my other patch of raspberries, and I also don't water it, but it does really great in spring, but not so well in summer. But these plants are fantastic, and I'm going to be digging some up to share with a friend pretty soon. Now, are there any veg that's easily propagated and shared around? Well, yes, there is. Now, globe artichoke's actually a flower that you eat, and so I don't know if it's called a vegetable or not, but anyway, globe artichokes can be propagated just by splitting the plant. With this plant here, there are a number of what they call pups, which is plants that come up from the roots. In and under the plants, you can see there's sort of a number of plants. This one here could potentially be dug up and shared around with friends, or just put in a different area of the garden to grow out. They are just about to come to life here with spring not far away. And probably the only one I consider doing is this one here that's really getting a bit pushed out by this other plant. You might be able to carefully get in there and get that out without damaging things. And just here's another example. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4 plants right here that could be all dug up and separated out. This bed is my asparagus and strawberry bed, and weed bed actually. Now my asparagus are just starting to come to life now, but back in autumn when they were dormant, I could have dug up the plant and split it to get 2 different crowns. You can do this every 3 to 4 years. You wouldn't want to do it every year. And when you plant it again as a split plant, you let it grow for a year or 2 before you harvest any of the spears, but then you're good to go after that. So asparagus is definitely one that you can share around. A spring onion clump is a good one to dig up, divide and spread around. And you just continue to let it grow, and then it clumps up and you get loads of spring onions to harvest. A vegetable that I have been experimenting with propagating is sweet potato. Back when I dug up a sweet potato from my garden, I decided to just trim some of the cuttings, which were still not affected by frost, and put them into water. Now, this is the result here. They're actually starting to grow, and as you can see, there's just loads of roots. These have just been sitting in their mason jars on my kitchen shelf and have really come to life. So I will be getting those planted just into, I've got a polystyrene box, and I'll be just protecting it from the cold still. I might keep it in my little greenhouse and just make sure that I look after it until I can get it into the ground when it warms up around here. So if you've got sweet potato plants and want plants for the next season, just take some trimmings, look after them inside, and then you can get started really quickly the next spring. Creating plants from cuttings or by dividing really allows you to fill your garden cheaply. Now, I've only just shown you a small example of plants that you can propagate, and I'd love to hear of plants that you've propagated down in the comments. I hope you've enjoyed today's video. If you have, please give me a like and consider subscribing if you haven't already. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.